My starting point is always running a series of lab tests to gather these like data insights from, hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy, and nervous systems. Because there's a difference between eating healthy and eating right for your body. And I have pictures of myself. I look emaciated.
Yeah.
Like literally look like a skeleton, like a Holocaust survivor or something. From that perspective, I realized I don't want to look like that.
Welcome to the Health Signal Podcast, where we make health data make sense. I'm your host, Boris Bedian, and on this show, we connect with trusted health experts who help us decode the trends, science, and signals shaping our health. Whether you're optimizing for longevity, managing stress, tracking sleep, or just trying to make smarter decisions in a noisy wellness world, this podcast is your accessible expert. Let's get into it. Jen, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me here.
Super excited because not only do I know you in business, but you've become a friend of mine. You've actually helped us in our booth before, so we have a long history. There's lots of jokes here that I'm not going to get into, but I really wanted to dig into a couple of things. I think you have kind of a unique perspective on healthcare and the healthcare market. You're very business savvy on top of understanding health and how to treat patients. Can you unpack a little bit, how do you approach patients, care with patients, and what led you to that journey?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think as a lot of us here in the functional health, holistic, integrative space, what led me here was my own personal health story. At the age of 25, I was diagnosed with skin cancer that nobody could explain to me. I was already a quote unquote healthy person by, basically mainstream standards. I was exercising and eating healthy, eating boneless, skinless chicken breast and broccoli. So much to the fact that I was training for fitness shows. I worked in the fitness industry. I studied kinesiology. And so it really made no sense when I received this diagnosis, like how did this actually occur?
Yeah.
But it sent me looking for answers, right? And as I started to seek out answers, I came across Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, which is an organization that does lab training and certification for practitioners. As you know, you guys are good friends with them as well too.
Yeah.
And through that process, I got exposed to what we would call like specialty labs or functional lab testing, which really revealed a lot of information about my body that I wasn't receiving through typical blood work. Because when I would go to my annual physical, I'd be told that I looked perfect on paper, and like my doctor wished that all of his patients were like me, right? And so through that training program, I really learned a new way of looking at disease, and that we have to look at the whole person, and understanding that the body is a complex network of systems. Like we have the hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy, nervous system, just to name a few, right? We have the limbic system. There's so many systems in the body that don't operate individually. And they're all interacting with each other at the same time. So when we're doing functional lab testing and running a series of labs like I do in my practice, we can collect a lot of data points from all these different places to then be able to track the patterns and the correlations, which is where there's a huge gap in our traditional medical system. I mean, everything is very siloed, right? You go to an endocrinologist to look at hormones. You go to a gastroenterologist to look at GI stuff that's going on. And those people are not talking to each other to track those data correlations and insights to really understand what's happening with a patient these days. And so there's just a huge gap in care, and the movement in the future, where we actually currently are right now, is about treating people as a whole person, not in this individual siloed kind of way, essentially.
This has been sometimes common on the pod, is treating the whole person or functional or integrative, whatever words you want to use. People get triggered on those words. So we'll just say treating the person, right? Yeah. And I also feel like back in the day, doctors were a little bit more like that. Like you had more of a personal doctor and a relationship, and they kind of knew your family. They'd, knock your knee and right.
right.
Right? So it's my thought process here is we had all these specialties to attack special problems, but then everything kind of became a specialty and siloed. Is that a good way to look at it, or how do you foresee that unfolding the way that it did?
Yeah, so I don't know how we got in the separation occurred, because even, I forget where I was exchanging this story or having this conversation with somebody, but somehow we got to talking about like the medieval days. And, you know, when you like think about the medieval days, or like, you know, a long time ago in history, you would have these villages, and within the village, there would be like one doctor, right? So think of that doctor as a primary care doctor.
Right.
That's who everybody went to for everything. That doctor was versed in a lot of different modalities and different parts of the body because they were the only person that was there. And in this conversation that I was having at some point in time, the scenario was, you know, if the whole village started to get sick, the doctor would actually look for patterns and correlations.
Yeah.
What did you eat? Where did you drink the water from? Like, and be able to track like bacteria that was occurring back to, you know, the local water source that that village had. And so somewhere along the lines in translation, the separation occurred. And I think that this is where we're moving back to a place of, you know, practitioners are starting to move back to a place of, let's really look at the whole picture again to truly understand what's happening with an individual in the sense of physiologically, like inside their body, but also the interactions with the outside world and the environment, to find some of those data points that help us understand and get to the root of what's going on with a person's health, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's like pendulum swings, etc.
Yeah.
What caused you to go FDN route, functional diagnostic nutrition, versus like something else? I know like you're very methodical, so I've actually never asked you this, so it's going to be great to learn.
Yeah, I mean, well, you actually just kind of said the word methodical.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. The first time that I ever saw Reed Davis speak, doing a webinar presentation, everything that he said, like light bulbs went on and it made sense.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the physiological aspects of the body. So he was talking about what's going on with the hormones like cortisol, estrogen, testosterone in relation to the digestive system when you're looking at bacteria overgrowth, parasites, pathogens, to what's going on in the detox capacity, to, you know, what's happening in the immune system and energy system. And the part that blew me away about it was, remember, I studied kinesiology.
Yep.
I took human anatomy, I took biology, I took organic chemistry, I took physiology, and I never heard any of my professors talk about this aspect of the body and all these interactions and correlations between the different systems. And so I dove in for myself. Like, first and foremost, I wanted to solve this issue with what was going on with not only my skin cancer, but regardless of all of my healthy efforts, I really struggled to like maintain my ideal body weight. I was accumulating seasonal allergies that were progressively getting worse, that led to like ear infections that would take me out for days at a time. I remember drinking a double Americano in the afternoon and struggling to keep my eyes open and starting to have really weird things happen, like getting nauseous after using a Sharpie marker and smelling all of those toxins. So I pursued this first and foremost for myself. But I also, at the time, working in the fitness industry, was recognizing that my clients were also doing all of the right things. They were logging all their calories, they were exercising, they were in a caloric deficit, yet not achieving their weight loss goals. And I was like, something is wrong here, right? I also loved the beauty of the idea that FDN is a complete methodology. It is a way of thinking and the tools to go along with it. So it really gets you out of that pigeonhole of treating and diagnosing, which is where I actually see a lot of practitioners that are even involved in the thought process of functional or integrative approaches. They get stuck because they get hyper-focused in one area when they're missing all these other aspects of what's going on in someone's, you know, physiology, essentially. And so that was really enticing, along with the ability to be able to work virtually. You know, I had reached kind of like the ceiling in the fitness industry, like you're stuck to a physical location.
Yeah.
I had even dabbled in corporate wellness, tried to move out, get some more freedom and flexibility in my life. And what was kind of like the rock bottom moment was when my corporate wellness employer actually fired me for leaving early on Fridays. I would come into the office early Fridays, leave early on Fridays to go see my terminally ill mom for the weekend.
Oh.
And after a couple months of doing that, they fired me. And I was like, I need to have the freedom and the flexibility to take care of myself and to be like present for those very important moments in life.
Yeah.
And FDN presented that opportunity. I love that you're asking this question because once I became an FDN, I started doing the work, absolutely loved it. But I also started to like question myself and go, do I need more credentials? Do I need more credibility in the space? And at one point in time in my journey, I also encountered mold in my house, which is a whole other story we could get into.
I'm sure we will.
But needed to seek the support of a licensed professional who could actually prescribe me thyroid medication because that mold triggered hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's, and I just needed some support to get out of that window.
Yeah.
So got myself a really like wonderful naturopath in San Diego, and I took her out to lunch one day and I said, hey, I'm thinking about going to naturopathic school. I'd love to know what you think about that. And I thought for sure that she was going to say wonderful things about it, right?
Yeah.
She looked me dead in the eye and she said, why would you do that? She's like, you can do everything that I can do without the handcuffs.
Interesting.
And she's like, you know, and if you need support in being able to like prescribe, she's like, we can always partner together to do that.
Yeah.
Because that is my limitation as a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner is I cannot diagnose or treat anything specifically and write prescription medications. But as we know, those things don't actually really solve people's problems in the first place.
Yeah.
So is that stuff truly necessary? I think that prescription medications and a diagnosis has a place, you know, in a person's journey potentially, but ultimately it's not the end-all solution.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think a lot of people who are practitioners, various different types, now I've met a ton of them, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of them do struggle with that, which is like, do I have enough credentials? Can I do this? Can I do that? And it's, at the end of the day, like, if you can get the result, nobody really cares, right? And the patients are going to tell people about those results. So it's like, just relax kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in practice for 11 years. I mean, hundreds of clients at this point in time. And I think in the 11 years I've been in practice, I've only ever had one person ever question my credentials. And not question it in a way that was like abrasive, but just curiously ask about my credentials. Everybody else I've ever worked with has never even asked what my credentials are or what my credentials mean. And a big part of that is tied to some of the business mentorship that I do with practitioners is that showing up authentically in the world in a way that is value-based, that connects with people, builds that trust and rapport. And when you have that connection with those potential clients or patients out there, then like the credentials don't really necessarily matter.
Yeah.
You know, they see you as the trusted guide that they're looking for.
So with all that said, when you approach somebody to get them healthy, what is do you kind of see where they at, right? Like, how are they going to listen to me? What are they going to listen to? Or do you have a starting point that you love going to? Talk me through, like, what would be your analysis there?
Yeah. So, you know, I know exactly what I'm doing at every step of the way with somebody. And this is in part, like, I'm able to do this because of the FDN methodology, which is a proven methodology to get repeatable results with people. Also, I'm very clear on who my ideal clients are and who I want to work with. So knowing that intimately, I know exactly when somebody comes to me to inquire about working with me, what it is that they need, essentially. And so my starting point is always running a series of lab tests to gather these like data insights from, you know, hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy, and nervous system. So we can see those patterns and correlations, not only amongst the data points, but also back to the person and what their symptoms are and what they're experiencing and what some of their main health complaints are, right?
Yeah.
And then we use that data to guide the recommendations for their lifestyle shifts and changes. So when I work with people, one of the first things that I focus on using those data points is to help them figure out what foods are right for their body so that they can function at their potential. Because there's a difference between eating healthy and eating right for your body. Some healthy
I think that's a good point.
Yes, it's like,
it's a great point.
This is where we can really get into this from a glucose monitor standpoint too, right? Because not every healthy food is right for your body, right? And I always give the example of a banana.
Yeah.
So we can globally agree, right, that an organic banana is nutritious. It's quote unquote healthy. It's full of potassium, like fiber, all these other things. But if you have a food sensitivity to that banana, or your body doesn't tolerate those carbohydrates and sugars really well, that healthy food is not right for your body. Right? So, and we want them to start getting the right foods into their body to get the nutrients that they need, which is going to fuel their cells, all the other aspects of the body to really get things online. Right?
Yeah.
Which allows us then allows me to then get into some of the deeper work of restoring balance to their body. Like with all that data and input, we can see the imbalances within the different systems of the body that we then are working to rebalance through the diet is going to help us do that, making sure that they're getting great sleep. We're bringing in supplements from a therapeutic perspective to fulfill the depletion and the needs that they have going on at that point in time. Ultimately working on some really huge lifestyle shifts like stress reduction and toxin removal, which are going to help to create a supportive environment moving forward so that they can maintain the results that they've achieved and continue making progress long term too.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think this is where everyone gets caught up. It's where do I start? And I'm like, you need to get data. I don't know how else to tell you. How else? How do you diagnose anything else? You get some data, or you do some experiment and see how it does, right?
There's the check engine light goes on in the car.
Yeah.
And what do? You take it to a mechanic.
Right.
And they run diagnostics, right? Which is the lab testing on the car to deduce what is going wrong to know what the solution is.
Exactly.
Right? Same thing with our computers or anything else. And so instead of taking a shot in the dark and wondering, as Reed Davis calls the cycle of trial and error, you can get really to the point and specific and know exactly what to do with the data.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. Speaking of data, what are your thoughts on, there's a whole craze on GLP-1s and peptides and all those things. So I know why you're laughing, and it's a little bit foreshadowing for everyone listening, but where do you stand with all that stuff? It is polarizing. It's the best thing in the world versus it makes you lose all your muscle. There's no side effects. There's a ton of side effects. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. There's a truth to everything. Where does Jenn stand on this?
Yeah, I think that we are in a huge population study right now that is not a controlled study. We actually don't know necessarily. So I was having a conversation with another person in our industry who's been observing this as well. And we were talking about how, GLP-1s have been around actually for a really long time, but they've been 20
years, right?
20 years, but they've been used in very specific therapeutic modalities, approaches, right? And now there's this whole blow up in the expansion of weight loss, anti-inflammation. So there actually has not ever been a time in history where GLP-1s have been used for consistently in a long-term capacity, this whole concept of microdosing.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So does anybody really know what the long-term effects of that are? Does the study exist? Not that I've really seen.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a huge population study that's happening, and I would like to wait until this, wait for the hype. Wait for the hype cycle to end to really then step back and go, interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see what's happened as a result of this.
Right.
This might be a little controversial, but I think that we could equate this to, similarly, in my perspective, is the introduction of a certain type of vaccine that has come to the market, right? in an effort to mitigate a pandemic, and that we were told that it was safe and there was no repercussions. And now here we are 4 years later, and we're actually seeing the adverse reactions come to light. So this is where I'm not necessarily going to jump in on this whole trend right now, because I'm waiting to see, okay, what is the actual possible downfall of this a couple years later, right? When there are all kinds of other solutions that are like sustainable and realistic for people that don't require that type of approach.
I'm with you, because everyone says like this is the best thing, and I was like, how do you know?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, the science says, and I'm like, well, the science hasn't been proven over like 5 decades.
Yes.
Right? Like something like a creatine has been studied for about 80 years. Mm-hmm. So when you're taking a creatine supplement, you're like, how much data do we have to back up this is actually safe?
Right.
And it's like 80 years is a long time, right? With the vaccines that you were talking about, I know I've read studies now of like news articles coming out, and they buried the wrong word, but like they were trying to say you can't look at the documents for 85 years. I'm like, just logically, if you're thinking about that, why would you bury something for 85 years? Because nobody cares. In 100 years, no one's going to care, right?
Yeah.
So what have you seen, like a pushback with patients or things in labs that have come as a result of certain vaccines?
Well, that's very interesting. So one of the lab tests that I like to do, there's a couple of them. So one is the hair tissue mineral analysis. It's a hair sample.
Yeah.
And we do get to pick up some toxic elements like mercury and aluminum. I also like to do Vibrant Wellness, their total tox burden test.
Yeah.
And literally a year ago in the fall, I onboarded a new client, did her hair tissue mineral analysis test, and on that HTMA result, she had a calcium level that was higher than anything that I had ever seen before. And even in going over the results with the clinical advisors that I run the lab tests through, like they were also shocked at the amount of calcium. So the reason that that's remarkable is because when the body has such a high level of calcium, it's called a calcium shell.
Gotcha.
So it's an inflammatory response, like a protective response that the body is doing, which is a lot of times related to like a trauma, emotional stress, but it's also just a lot of stress and inflammation in the body, right? Yeah. So this is where we look for other correlating data points. This individual also had some of the highest levels of aluminum and mercury.
Wow.
On this test.
Yeah.
And so in going over this with clinical directors and asking questions about this case, the question came up, is this particular individual getting vaccines regularly?
Yeah.
So when I sat down and went over the results with this client of mine and asked that question, she, very openly shared, well, yes, I've been following the vaccine schedule. In fact, I was just about to schedule my booster and my flu shot.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I think you should take this into consideration, because look at your symptoms and what you're challenged with in your body right now.
Yeah.
And here's what the data is showing us. You're not a high-risk individual. I mean, that's also something that was very important to point out, is that we need to be making informed decisions about what we're doing with our body. She was not in a high-risk age range, and she did not have any of the high risk like different like obesity or like any of the other biological factors that go into that. And so that's just one example of something that I'm seeing. I've picked up this on the total tox burden test, like high metals, and a lot of times that will correlate with people that have been following an immunization or vaccine schedule. Honestly, a lot of the patients or clients that I work with, they're already kind of, as we might say, on the fringe, where they're catching on. They've already caught on to the fact that like their bodies probably don't need those things, and so they've been avoiding them already. So I don't really see a lot of it in my practice necessarily.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I was at my doctor's for my daughter, and I was asking the doctor questions, and they were talking about the flu shot, and I said, okay, well, can you show me the data to make an informed decision? It's exactly what you're talking about, right? So like, how do I make an informed decision on this? And they're like, well, it's 50% effective. And I was like, that's a terrible, like, why would you risk getting somebody sick off last year's strains and at 50% efficacy, right? And I'm like, it doesn't make a lot of sense, guys. Like, why is this being pushed? And then, it is a microdose of heavy metals into the body. Probably not enough that one shot, but like if you're combining them, but I was like, you gotta like think logically. I told her, I'm like, listen, like 50% is terrible. If you said like 99%, that's a different story. Totally. I get the risk to reward ratio, but if it's a 50-50 coin flip, like that's worse than Vegas odds, right? Like you're and it's like, these are the things that people don't ask. So I like that you're touching base on them, because it's like, okay, it's recommended, but why is it recommended? Is it good for my body? Like, do I have predispositions to these things? Like, there's so many factors that people are uneducated on or never told about.
Yeah.
That I like that you're bringing that up.
Yeah, and I just think that, like, as humans, we have to start asking more questions and advocating for ourselves. I was telling somebody this the other day about an experience that I had with my dog and his health. So my beloved lab, he had chronic GI issues that we fought for so long trying to save him, and eventually we lost him to his chronic illness. But along that way, as we were working with the vets, there was a moment in time where I discovered that the vet had withheld like options from us.
Interesting.
And I lost it. Like I lost it on them, and I said, moving forward, I want to know what all of my options are so that I can make the best informed decision for me and my loved one, right? And that happens all the time in our healthcare system, is because the traditional healthcare system works off of an algorithm. So like my clients all the time are having a hard time getting a full thyroid panel, for example, because the health insurance companies have controlled what is approved and what's not approved, and they have you work through this algorithmic process to get to the next level. So they'll like start with TSH, which as practitioners know doesn't really tell us anything, and if TSH is outside of range, then they'll approve coverage for running additional markers, right? But because TSH is not telling about what's happening with the thyroid, then if TSH comes back fine, that doesn't mean anything necessarily, and now the client or that patient never got the rest of the information to really solve their thyroid problem. So this is where, like, when I work with my clients, I'm educating them about their thyroid, about all the markers, and letting them know, go in and ask for this panel. You need to request all of them. Get as much covered by insurance as possible, and you need to be willing to pay out of pocket, pay cash for the rest if they won't approve insurance coverage. In order to get the full picture of what's actually happening, so you can make that informed decision about the next step.
That's where incentives are not aligned.
Correct.
Right? Because this is my incentive, I'm just going to push that. But then if you're not even given the option of something else, you don't know that path is available to you. And this is like the biggest probably unknown injustice to people, is when they find stuff like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. Oh, I didn't know that was an issue. Right. So,
but I think there's a mutual responsibility that as a society we've become complacent. We've become complacent, and we've put the responsibility of our health in other people's hands. On a very practical application level, like when I'm working with clients and we're working on adjusting their food and their diet, and the circumstances come up of like, oh, I have to go to a social event or somebody's birthday party or whatever, and they're like, there's nothing there for me to eat. And I was like, this is where you're abdicating your responsibility. You're putting your well-being and your food needs in somebody else's hand, right? Making it their responsibility, and it's not their responsibility. So how do you eat before you go? Or you bring your own food, which I do all the time.
That's hilarious. You can just picture you like showing up to a Christmas party. With like your own Tupperware.
It's true. Jeremy and I just went to a Friendsgiving, and we knew there was going to be a bunch of food that we couldn't eat or wasn't going to be great for us to eat. So Jeremy did pork belly. We brought our own snacks, and we still enjoy the social environment with our friends, but also didn't have the domino effect, the impacts later, because we took responsibility for our own food needs instead of putting it in somebody else's hands, right? And so people just need to wake up, and they can't be complacent. anymore. And I think that when they are getting data from lab testing,
Yeah.
it is the wake-up call that they need sometimes. It's the motivating factor
Yeah.
to do things differently.
You make a good point. I have a I have a friend, she's a nurse in San Francisco, like one of the big hospitals there. Mm-hmm. And she was saying how people would come in and, you know, they would do readings on them and it'd be like, you know, 69 mg per DL, so like just under 70. Mm-hmm. And the nurse would be like, all right, give them 1,000 grams of that sugar like dose into the veins.
Oh my God.
And she was like, I was one of the only nurses that would be like, hang on a second. That person is 1 milligram per DL off. If people don't know what I'm talking about, it's like, basically just like, there's no thought process. It's like, this is off even by a 0.01% metric. Mm-hmm. So load this person up with 1,000 grams of sugar. And I'm just like, nobody thinks about
1,000 grams of sugar.
because they don't like, they're just like, this is what's approved as long as this number hits.
Right.
Nobody talked to she's like, did you talk to the patient? She's like, yeah. Is he slurring his words? Because he was diabetic.
Right.
No. Does he have any of the other symptoms? And she's like, no, he's actually pretty fine. And she's like, okay, so why would we give him the sugar? It doesn't make sense. Let's test again in 10 minutes.
Right.
They did, and the sugars were in normal ranges.
Oh, look at that.
Right? And it's like, okay, well, but that's also would have like the taxpayer dollar would have cost that hospital so much money to administer 1,000 milligrams of, I don't know if it was 1,000, but it was a lot of sugar in one shot to this person that absolutely didn't need it. And as we know, in the long term is not a good thing for them to be getting that much sugar anyway. Right. And so this is the like algorithm approach is like this, and it's not even algorithm. It's more like this happens and you do this.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But it's like, okay, well, is the patient okay? Like, has anybody asked the patient, you know, anything? Like the answer was no. Right. So, yeah. Let's go into a little bit more. I was interested, even before you had your health issues, you were, correct me if I'm wrong, bikini competitor?
Yeah.
Okay. So what got you into that? Were you always into health and fitness? Was it a like something happened and then you got into it? Like what was your come up story? Because I don't actually know it in that much detail.
Oh, it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I would say that I grew up in a generally health-oriented household.
Yeah.
My dad was a runner and like he would work out in the morning times. And so I remember being a little girl, like, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5, and he would get up and it would still be dark outside.
Yeah.
And he would go for a run and I would get on my bike and I would go with him.
That's amazing.
In the morning time.
Yeah.
And we had a garden where we grew some of our own vegetables and things. And I was the kind of kid that, you know, came home from school and then did my homework. And then I was out in the street playing until the sun went down. So my dad was also super into football. And I grew up in, my household was a single dad household.
That makes sense that your husband's Jeremy.
Yeah. And diehard 49ers fan. And I grew up in the 80s. So the 90s 49ers dynasty.
Yeah.
And I got it in my head that I wanted to be a sports psychologist. So I remember hearing about how teams, like NFL teams, would have a sports psychologist that would help players, you know, return back to play on the field from a mental, you know, like psychology perspective. And I was absolutely fascinated about that. So when I looked at going to college, there was essentially 2 tracks to get into that field. Was you go down the kinesiology route, like pre-physical therapy, athletic training, or you go down the psychology route.
Right.
And I thought it was going to be really fascinating to go more like the athletic training route, because when you're doing like kinesiology, athletic training, you're actually working with sports teams. So in college, I was the person that was taping ankles before practice and during games, and got to work with the football team and the women's basketball team. And then decided I didn't want to do that because coming out of college, the pay was not so great. And then you had to go get your master's in sports psychology, and that was going to be a really long road. So I said, well, what do I do now, right? And with a degree in kinesiology, I decided to get into the fitness industry. So I cut my teeth at 24-Hour Fitness back in the day. Cool. And was started there as a personal trainer, moved up through management really quickly. I think by the age of 25, I was definitely managing a multi-million-dollar fitness facility. which is, I basically got my
That's awesome.
MBA.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's like way better than an MBA.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like learning how to do business on a day-to-day basis, you know, real life, hitting all of my like sales goals like every month and bonusing out, you know, which was fantastic. And I really got into the fitness competition, like the bikini competition work, because I was struggling to achieve my ideal weight goals. So I thought this will be like motivation, accountability to like train harder, like, you know, achieve these certain goals. And that's how I got into doing a couple of those essentially, which is wild. I mean, I was carb cycling before keto and carb cycling became a thing, you know? And it's bananas to think about like what that industry is like and how it's still, a lot of it is like the same. That, you know, I was joking with a practitioner the other day who has a similar history in that fitness competition world. And we were talking about how like the day of the competition, that everybody is behind the stage crushing candy bars. Yeah. Like basically what you do is
to look full, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I forget exactly what the routine is, but you kind of like, you start cutting back water, dehydrating yourself like about 24 to 48 hours before show. And then the day of the show, before you get on stage, you're basically crushing sugar and pumping bands in the background.
That's right.
So you get the glucose pump. So your skin's super tight because you're dehydrated, but your muscles look really plump, basically.
Yeah. I bet like 10% of people are like, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
They're listening to this.
Yeah. And I think like my first show, I got down to like my dream weight of, you know, back when that was like the early 2000s. So, you know, I think a lot of women can relate to this that might be watching this, is that, you know, it was the ideal 125 pounds. Like that's what I was looking for. I got to 127 and I have pictures of myself. I look emaciated. Yeah. Like literally look like a skeleton, like a Holocaust survivor or something. Yeah. But it was from that perspective, I realized I don't want to look like that. Yeah. That's not where I look at my best. And I think my second show, I was more like around like 130, 132. Yeah. And, you know, and then when I got married at 30, I was like 135. And so those are much healthier weights for me. But I mean, and now I'm in my 40s and I'm at like 145 and I feel healthier and stronger at this weight than I ever did during those fitness competitions.
Well, I think also for women, like most women don't realize you should have more body fat than men. Right. It's way more important, right? Exactly. Like a man could be at like 12% and actually be functioning and it's fine. Yeah. A woman at 12% is actually pretty dangerous. Like the hormones get messed up, their menstrual cycle, everything is kind of, because they need it. It's like for growing other humans. Yeah. Mechanisms are there that men don't have.
Right, and that's how our body is just designed to be, regardless of whether or not you're procreating.
Exactly, regardless.
We don't get to flip the switch off. Like I don't have kids, so I didn't get to like flip that switch off. It's just the biological design of my body, right?
Right,
and
exactly.
It's a necessity, you know, which I think goes back to the GLP-1 conversation that we were having, where there are some women out there that have a healthy body at a healthy weight, and they're using GLP-1s to microdose and cut body fat percentage even more. And I just wonder if that's actually safe, knowing that a woman's body does need a minimum amount of body fat to actually be healthy from a hormonal perspective and a metabolic standpoint, you know?
Well, even like men, right? Like in bodybuilding, the men get down to 4 to 6%, let's say. Mm-hmm. Notoriously, the body is just starving. All their labs look absolutely like terrible. Nothing's good about their health, but they look like an absolute unit on stage. Right. And like Greek god physique, right?
Right, and the body will cannibalize itself. Yeah. You know, we can see this on when we run a Dutch test to look at like cortisol hormone, like testosterone, estrogens. We can see if a body's in a catabolic state or an anabolic state. And in that catabolic state, it's literally cannibalizing itself. Right. Right. And so a lot of that strain, that stress of being at such a low body fat percentage, and then, you know, grinding your body into the ground with like intense workout routines, not to mention the stress that comes from our environment and all the other things that are happening in our life. Like, A lot of the clientele that I actually work with, they're CrossFitters, they're highly active individuals.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem, is that their internal systems are so dysfunctional. They're like grinding their bodies into the ground with their intense workout routines, that they're actually depleting it even more.
Yeah.
And so I'll have to recommend that they reduce their exercise intensity for a period of time while we can restore balance to the body, and then they can pick it back up, and they're not like they've gotten themselves out of the hole that they've dug,
Yeah.
essentially, and they can perform at that level again.
Yeah, it is interesting because I've probably never been at like 8 to 10%. I've gotten down, I would say like 12, 15's easy, but like as you're getting down to 10, your body really doesn't like it. Like
Yeah.
it really pushes you. I like the mental aspect of that. Like
Yeah.
it's like a cool, like, okay, now you need to like, it's all mental there.
Right.
But at the same time, you should never be less than 10% for a really long
Yeah.
time. It's absolutely destroying your hormones.
Right.
Right. And this is
Exactly.
the thing that nobody cares. They just want to look good.
Right.
And I've said this almost every episode. Like, people are going to knock on me and be like, you always say that. I'm like, it's true though. Like most
Yeah.
people say, I want to be healthy, but they actually want to look good.
Yeah.
And so we need to cater to that first and then the health after.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and that is the aesthetics, the outside of it is what is in the mirror every day.
Yeah.
That gets people to start thinking and questioning themselves.
Yeah.
And then when we really dig a little bit deeper, recognize, like asking the right questions. Well, what is it about the weight loss or your skin looking better, reverse aging? It really boils down to like the confidence that they desire and that they want to set a good example for their children. You know, like I just had the delight of going out to dinner with one of my clients that's been working with me for about 4 years now. She lives in Seattle. She was in San Diego. And so we met up for dinner. First time we've ever met in person, which was amazing. And we were just reminiscing about how she started working with me. And she said that it was because it was Halloween and some picture was taken. And she looked at the picture and she was like, oh my God, is that what I look like? Like, I look so tired.
Yeah.
Like, I've aged so much. And granted, like, she's not old, like she's, midlife, fairly young. She's got kids that are like approaching their teens at this point in time, but she's, maybe a couple years older than me, I would say. But that was that moment that she needed that struck the interest to explore what she could do for herself and her health to look better, but also to feel better. She was having all kinds of like really interesting inflamed gums, like gum pain, other stuff that was going on that's been completely resolved. She's the client that I've told you about before that she now in our work together, she's in like maintenance and optimization.
Yeah.
So she has an Aura ring.
Nice.
And she has a CGM.
Amazing.
And she literally is in Biocanic, like biohacking her data points to see how she can manage her glucose better in order to improve her sleep score.
I love it.
And then she's also tracking it in the different phases of her menstrual cycle to know, okay, during certain parts of my menstrual cycle, my sleep suffers.
Yep.
And during those times, here's how my blood sugar, my glucose is becoming erratic. And so during these, she's pinpointed that during those specific times in her cycle, she needs more fat and protein to balance her blood sugar that then gets her the greatest amount of sleep, like quality in those times. I mean, talk about becoming such an advocate, like informed person for yourself.
Yeah.
Like that's like the dream client at this point in time.
Absolutely.
I love working with her.
Well, because they're in it with you, right?
Yeah.
And I think practitioners sometimes really struggle with how do I keep this person motivated, and it's like at the end of the day, look, if they're not, they got to get there some point. Like you can't always be dragging them across the foot,
right? Exactly.
Finish line. So
yeah, exactly. And it's not like she showed up that way.
Yeah.
She showed up ready to learn, ready to do the work, and this has evolved over time as she has become more informed about her body.
Yeah.
It's become more motivating where she's really funny now. Like her first session of every new year, she shows up with a list and a budget.
Amazing.
And she's like, here, I have my budget for the year, and here's the list of health tools that I'm thinking about investing in, and I want to pick your brain about what's my next thing. So now we're like,
Yes.
red light therapy or
Yeah.
a sauna, like what's the next thing that she can incorporate into her life?
Yeah.
Is it a whole house filtration system? Like, some stuff like that too, that's actually going to continue to create that supportive environment for her to really thrive. And she's setting such a great example for her kids in this whole process and this journey that she's
Totally.
on.
Yeah. They're going to get so much more growing up in an environment where that's the norm.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a night and day difference in terms of like the decisions they make, etc.
Yeah.
Cool. I want to dive into one more thing.
Okay.
Since you're all about the data and we don't have enough data when we talked about GLPs, etc., what's your take on hormone replacement therapies? Because now I can make the argument back to you and say there's not enough data on these either, but pretty much everybody swears, everybody that's had any HRT, TRT
Yeah.
that I've talked to, and that's numerous people now because it's so prominent.
Right.
They love it. They're like, my life has changed. I'm a different person.
Yeah.
I feel like a man now, like the guys that I talk to. I was like, okay, but at the same time, you haven't been on this for like 20 years. Nobody has really. Right. So this is why I'm very interested in your personal take on this, because I think you deal with a lot of hormone imbalances.
I do.
Yeah.
The first thing I want to say is that I'm much more open to the bioidenticals, like the more natural approaches to hormone replacement versus synthetic, right? Like,
Yeah.
just like with thyroid medication, there's the option of natural thyroid medication, natural glandulars versus synthetic. And so how do we work with the most natural components of the body? And I've seen everything from, I currently have a client postmenopausal on 0 hormone replacement therapy, and she is thriving and doing amazing. Now she's been working with me for 5 years, and she came to me with fibroids,
Yeah.
uterine fibroids that were so large she could feel them. And by working on rebalancing her body, getting rid of inflammation, eating right, all that stuff, the fibroids have shrunk so much that she can't feel them anymore.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And she's, like I said, totally thriving.
Yeah.
And so we recently had a conversation about, is hormone replacement therapy something that she should explore? And
Yeah.
so I said, if you want to explore it, it's totally fine. Do you have any symptoms? And she was like, no. And I was like, so that's the thing that we always want to think about is when we're using the data, when we're thinking about data, we also want to correlate it back to the person, right?
Yeah.
So if they don't have any symptoms,
Yeah.
do we actually need to treat anything in that kind of way? And then with her, we went through her history of what we know about her, what the data has shown us, and she's very estrogen sensitive. So she was estrogen dominant when she started working with me. We did different supplements and herbs to help like neutralize estrogen in her body. There were moments in time when we pulled some of that supplementation out,
Yeah.
and her fibroids would flare back up. Then eventually we got her to a place where she could come off of that stuff and her fibroids would not flare back. She also recognizes that when she eats too much sugar and carbohydrates, her fibroids flare up, which there is a direct correlation there with estrogen as well when we have those sugars and carbs. So I said, just know your body, and knowing that you're estrogen sensitive, if you are going to explore hormone replacement therapy, let's talk about how testosterone aromatizes to estrogen, your probably safest route, which would be progesterone. And like, if you're going to do anything, like take the smallest amount, introduce one thing at a time, and titrate it up to find what works for you, right? But I don't think that is the approach all the time. It's very like, here's the standard, here you go, right? The challenge that I think that we have here is, in order to like be able to look at this and say this is the reductionist answer, is that the environment that we live in, right? And the environment that we live in and all the toxins that are in this environment that are endocrine disruptors, so hormone disruptors, the toxins that are in our environment that affect our liver and our detox capacity. I'm sure you're going to have Sinclair on at some point in time, who can provide so many insights about like gallstones and liver function. This is where it's just murky water with hormone replacement therapy. So I think about a guy who has low testosterone and gets placed on testosterone, right? And that we want to ask the question of, why does that person have low testosterone in the first place? Well, it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. Like, is this person in a catabolic state?
Yeah.
The body is like cannibalizing itself. That person is not eating the right foods to produce testosterone at the appropriate level, the optimal level that we want. And also there is a risk of, if you supplement with testosterone, it's just going to aromatize or convert into estrogen,
right.
which is where we see a lot of men getting placed on T, and then they start developing man boobs, gaining weight, right? Because it's converting into estrogen.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there is a direct answer. I think, again, it has to be individualized to the person. And I do know, I always want to think about, does somebody need symptom relief? Like, are they in a state where they feel so bad that, yes, you need to give them an acute solution? So is HRT going to stop the night sweats, stop the migraines, get them into a place where they have the bandwidth and capacity to do the real work in their lifestyle, where maybe eventually they don't need hormone replacement therapy anymore? I think we always have to be thinking about that. And I personally had to do something similar at a point in my journey. Like, we had toxic mold in our home for years that we didn't know about. My body was imploding, essentially. Eventually discovered it. Found out that I was estrogen dominant. I was in a hypothyroid state. I had thyroid antibodies, Hashimoto's, and I made an informed decision to take thyroid medication, natural thyroid medication, the smallest dose, while I worked on healing my body from that circumstance. And I was on thyroid medication for 6 months until I reversed my Hashimoto's and got my thyroid back into balance naturally, and I've never had to take it again. Right?
Which is awesome.
It's and I think it boils down to, like, are people really willing to do the work? And some people aren't. So they're going to take the hormone replacement therapy, and it's going to solve their problems. It'd be that Band-Aid solution that maybe it's going to cause additional problems down the road for them. And maybe at that point in time, it doesn't matter anymore. A lot of people get on HRT a little bit later in life. So again, we don't really know what the long-term use effects are. We're in this whole global population study again, I think.
Yeah, totally.
But I do know, there's some practitioners out there that are using it very ethically, like Dr. Deb Matthews is one of my great friends, and she is wonderful in this area in her clinic, and Donna White trains people in this area to do this, in an educated and ethical way with clients. And so I think that there are, some decent solutions that are out there for people who need it.
Amazing. Excellent. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Jenn, where can people find you, interact with you, potentially work with you, whether business or health-wise?
My favorite place to hang out is Instagram. So
I can attest to that.
You can attest to that. We're always on Instagram together.
Always.
Yeah, Instagram at Holistic Health Boss. Holistic is with a W, like whole person, whole foods. And that's also my website is holistichealthboss.com.
Perfect. You were awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of The Health Signal. We hope you're leaving with one small insight you can use and one big idea to explore. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow the Health Signal podcast and leave us a review if it helps simplify something complex. To learn more about how Thea is helping providers and patients make data-driven health decisions, visit theahealth.ai or check out the links in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.